The Shooting Range. In this episode, Pages of History, the Uncanny Cannery. Special, what's new about Battleship armor? And Metal Beasts, the Israeli T-54. Not long ago, we discussed the Chinese modification of the T-54, but China is far from the only nation that used this famous Soviet tank. The Wind of Change update brought a new modification of this machine, this time to the Israeli tech tree. With new armament and equipment, this tank received the name of Tiran 4S. The old gun was replaced with an American 105mm cannon with elevation angles between -4 and +17 degrees. The main caliber is complemented by a coaxial and a pintle-mounted machine gun. The layout is classic. The driver and the fuel tanks are in the front, 3 more crew members are in the turret, and the engine compartment is found in the rear of the machine. The ammo stowage is spread throughout the combat compartment. The new cannon brought along a new set of ammo for the tank. The first and the main type of shell is the discarding sabot one. Its great ballistics, sufficient penetration rate, and a decent beyond armor effect make it a versatile tool for any scenario. Sometimes you might also need the Heat FS shell with 400mm of pen, for those extra thick enemies. Why is it not the main one, you might ask? The reason is its lower velocity compared to the APDS round and, more importantly, vulnerability to reactive armor and obstacles, such as fences, trees, and other landscape elements. The HESH and the smoke shells will have even less use. The former allows you to damage a target by hitting the seemingly less critical areas, like the turret roof. An example of such an opportunity is when an enemy is hiding behind a rock, or in an urban environment where only a part of the hull and turret are visible. Hitting these parts with the APDS or Heat FS round won't deal much damage. However, a HESH launched into a turret roof has a good chance of incapacitating the crew and damaging the gun breech. The smoke shell can provide a safe crossing of a dangerous area for you and your allies. It's an impressive arsenal, but overall, it's still the same old T-54 with all its pros and cons. The Tiran's aiming speed is lacking compared to most counterparts. The tight turret reduces the reload speed. The depression angle of just -4 degrees makes fighting in hilly areas inconvenient, and the lack of smokescreen systems reduces survivability. Its advantages are best used in medium to long-range battles. Reload rates and aiming speeds mean less here, while the armor handles enemy hits better with increased distance. With some lucky angles, even discarding sabot rounds can ricochet off it. It was early morning on November the 29th, 1940. Off the coast of the Horn of Africa, the Walrus flying boat had just taken off from the New Zealand cruiser, Leander. This small rescue and reconnaissance aircraft had a very peculiar mission developed deep in the British intelligence service. In case of success, it had a chance to drastically change the military landscape in North Africa. What kind of mission was it? Let's try to figure it out while the float plane is pacing slowly towards its target. We'll have to go back some time. In the autumn of 1940, the distinguished gentlemen from the British intelligence were big experts in finding odd coincidences and had a good understanding of cans. Cans are still available in diameters of 60, 82, and 122 millimeters. Don't believe us? You can check it for yourself. Now, one little odd story didn't sit well with the British intelligence. A regular can factory found in the territory of Italy-occupied Somalia received a wireless communication point out of the blue, and so much anti-air defense started to cover it that no bomber could even approach. Wasn't that too much to be a coincidence? Could that cannery have become a factory making mortar shells? You know, artillery rounds need to be turned in a lathe, but mortar shells are much easier to make since they aren't that different from tin cans. Land access from the British Somalia, Kenya, or Egypt was closed. Too many anti-aircraft guns and fighter aircraft. Sea access wasn't an option either. There were no aircraft carriers in the region. So, by now you must have guessed why the supermarine Walrus was sent full of bombs towards the Cannery. A single, sluggish flying boat, an inconspicuous creation of the great Reginald Mitchell, the author of the already famous Spitfire. Following a low altitude, that machine could easily sneak in from the sea, bomb the comms point, and then attack the factory itself. Why not try it then? The attempt to bomb the comms facility turned out to be fruitless. The Walrus didn't even have a bomb sight, so the explosion of a small HE bomb was more of a literal wake-up call for the Italian military. The Leander cruiser started shelling the airfield, slowing down the Italian fighters' attempt to intercept the bold float plane and giving the latter some time to bomb the factory itself. And that was just the opportunity the Walrus had been waiting for. A single 250-pound bomb hit the factory floor and produced an explosion so big the windows were blown out all over the area together with the frames. Now, what could be the reason for such a big boom? Not the expired canned foods, right? Mayhem ensued, giving the slow Walrus enough time to slip away, and the cruiser successfully picked it up. Meanwhile, the Italian military was left without mortar shells, and perhaps with no canned foods. We still know neither the name of the officer who planned this operation nor the name of the pilot of the float plane that day. The Wind of Change update introduced a change to the armor belts and vertical armor elements on large vessels, dividing them into destroyable plates. So, how can you quickly get rid of the main armor on a battleship? How vulnerable will it become once you do that? Let's find out together. We'll use the German Kaiser battleship for our target. Its armor belts of various thicknesses are pretty convenient for us. We'll first shoot from 1 kilometer away, then 5, using the most widespread naval calibers, 152, 305, and 356 millimeters. Let's start with the upper armor belt, 200 millimeters thick. It was already easy to penetrate with armor-piercing 356 millimeter shells, and now there's also plate destruction effects. HE shells of the same caliber require 2 hits to compromise armor integrity. Let's load a smaller gun, 305 millimeters. No change visible in the effect of the capped shells. The armor is penetrated. The HE shells now need 4 hits to damage the armor plate. Okay, moving down to 152 millimeters. The armor-piercing shells are now much weaker. 4 hits are needed to damage the armor belt, while HE shells with that caliber deal no damage at all. Let's increase the distance to 5 kilometers. The shells lose a lot of kinetic energy at this distance, so the results must be different. The large caliber AP rounds still achieve the results at first hit, while 152mm capped ones need no less than 6 hits compared to 4 last time. There's no sense in shooting the smaller HE shells since they were already useless before. The 305 and 356mm calibers now need 8 and 4 hits, respectively, twice as much as in our previous attempt. Let's test the thickest armor belt in the game, 350mm. These armor plates handle our rounds much better. 152 and 305mm HE shells are useless, even at 1 kilometer away, while the 356mm shells of the same type can only damage the armor on the 8th hit. The armor-piercing shells are doing expectedly better. The 356 and the 305mm capped ones still have enough energy to penetrate the armor. Now the 152mm guns will need at least 8 hits to destroy the plate. At 5 kilometers away, the most powerful HE shells need 10 hits, while the armor-piercing ones need 12, 2, or 1 hit depending on the caliber. Of course, we only checked a small share of all possible combinations, but even that shows how much the armor plate integrity depends on the kinetic energy of the shells. There are still more factors in a real battle, like an individual's projectile's parameters and the angle it hits the armor at. It's impossible to memorize it all, and makes little sense, to be honest. You can check the enemy's armor plate integrity using the Hit X-ray view. Now, the best part starts when the plate is compromised. When a high explosive shell flies into a damaged piece, its couple of dozen kilograms of explosives go off inside the vessel instead of on the armor. Needless to say, this doesn't do much good to the ship. The explosion will hit the internal modules, knock out the crew, start fires, and might cause a rapid sinking. Unfortunately for the enemy, it takes too long for the water filling the ship to extinguish the fires. It's actually typical for all rounds filled with explosives to have increased efficiency against targets stripped of armor. So, if you have no HE shells, it makes sense to aim for the vulnerabilities, shooting both capped and SAP rounds. All these changes make top naval battles in War Thunder even more realistic. Previously, battleships could survive almost an entire battle under enemy fire, sustaining dozens or even hundreds of main-caliber hits. Now, defensive maneuvering is much more important. You need to learn how to get a better angle for your armor and switch the sides to take more hits. Also, your own fire accuracy is more of a priority now. Use your fresh knowledge in battle. Brace your armor belts. Aim your shots, and fair seas. Meanwhile, it's time for us to answer some of the questions you've asked us in the comments. The first question was sent by a player called Psy Pro. Why does the MiG-23 have a semi-automatic wing sweep mode and the Su-22 has a manual wing sweep mode? Hi, Psy. These modes are indeed similar, but there's also a difference. The manual one allows you to control the wing sweep with no limits, while the semi-automatic one won't allow the pilot to straighten the wing when the speed is too high. Christy S. asks, is the U-88A1 good for dive bombing? Hey, Christy. Yeah, it's pretty good for a flat dive bombing, especially with 50-kilogram bombs. You can spray these all over enemy tanks. However, we don't recommend taking a sharp dive. It has almost no advantages, but makes exiting the dive much harder. Another question comes from Pahor95. How do I use countermeasures? Is there a button to assign? Hello there. You must mean the aircraft countermeasures. Yes, there's a button for them. You can assign by going to Controls, Aircraft, Weaponry, Fire Countermeasures. Crystal Sharkey writes, Is there any aircraft which has a payload so heavy for it that it can barely lift off? Hi, Sharky. Actually, yes. What came to our mind was the Soviet Year-2 bomber. It's really hard for it to take off with a payload of 5 tons. And the last comment for today was written by Knox Butler. Here's a challenge. Try to get some air-to-air kills with Maverick missiles. Hey, Knox Butler, that's a great idea. We'll try our hand at the shooting range first, but pulling it off in random battles will be pretty much fun too. It's hard to say how much time it'll take us, but we'll try to do it quickly. Don't miss it. Well, one more time, that's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, and the next episode will premiere the following Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. Subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss our next videos. You know why. And don't forget to leave a like. Again, you know why. Check if your local cannery is suspicious. You never know. Share your thoughts and comments, and we'll see you next week.